This is a module on the first 3 of Marzano's 9 essential strategies for effective instruction. All 3 of these strategies are connected to the larger goal of creating an environment for learning. The first strategy is setting objectives and providing feedback. Objectives are explicit statements of what students are going to learn or be able to do by the end of a lesson or unit. Objectives, which could also be thought of as lesson-level goals, help to ensure that learning activities are relevant and purposeful. Students need to see a clear connection between what they are being asked to do during a lesson and what they are supposed to learn during a lesson. Otherwise, they might fairly ask, "What's the point?" or "Why are you asking me to do this?" Here are a few guidelines and best practices for setting objectives. First, when you set learning objectives for a lesson, you should make sure that the objective is specific but not restrictive. For example, imagine that we have 3 sample objectives. Student will be able to write persuasively for a specific audience. Student will be able to describe the appeal to emotion persuasive strategy in 3 sentences or less. And student will be able to identify 3 persuasive strategies, explain their purposes, and use them in a sample piece of writing. The first objective is very broad. A whole bunch of knowledge and skills are required to write persuasively, and they can't all be taught in a single lesson. The second objective is so specific that it might actually be limiting. The scope of a lesson should extend beyond just giving a short description of a single strategy. The last objective is appropriately specific. It describes specifically what students will be able to do by the end of the lesson, but it's broad enough to allow for students to construct knowledge and engage in higher order thinking. Second, an objective should be stated in terms of what students are going to learn, not what activities they are going to complete. For example, student will be able to analyze the political and economic effects of the Stamp and Tea Acts on the British colonies would be an appropriate objective. But student will be able to read pages 77 to 92 and answer the questions about the Stamp and Tea Acts would not be an appropriate objective. Remember that the ultimate goal of a lesson should always be student learning, not activity completion. Third, communicate learning objectives explicitly to your students. Your students should always know what they are learning, why they are learning it, and how a particular task will help them to learn it. The second part of the setting objectives and providing feedback strategy is providing feedback. Feedback is explicit guidance that helps students adjust their learning. Feedback can and should be given throughout a lesson. For example, feedback can be given on student responses to teacher or student-initiated questions, or while students are practicing. When giving feedback to students, it is important to remember some important criteria. First, good feedback addresses what is correct and also elaborates on what students should do next. Second, good feedback is provided in time to address student needs. The best feedback is the kind that students can use just in time to improve a product or improve understanding. Third, feedback should be criterion referenced, which means that it should be based on a clear vision of student mastery. In other words, feedback should be based on a vision of what it should look like when a student is performing the skill at a high level. Fourth, teachers should teach students how to provide high-quality feedback to one another. This happens through explaining the purpose behind feedback and explicitly modeling and teaching what high-quality feedback looks like. Before we move on, there are a few pitfalls to avoid when giving feedback. First, some teachers make the mistake of giving feedback that is too general and saying things like, "Good job," or "Nice work." These kinds of generic compliments don't tell students what they are doing well or what steps they need to take to improve. Some examples of more specific feedback would be, That's a great example of using evidence from the text to support an inference. Or, after you solve for the variable, make sure to substitute it back into the equation to check your work. Second, another pitfall that can compromise the quality of your feedback is teaching a lesson without a clear understanding of the objective, or teaching a lesson without a clear vision of what it will look like for students to master the objective. For example, if your assessment at the end of a lesson is that students will write a paragraph analyzing the story we read, it will be hard to give feedback beyond generic encouragement like, "Give me more detail," or "Make it longer." However, if you have a specific vision of student mastery, like students will write an analytical paragraph that weaves in at least 2 pieces of textual evidence and gives commentary about them, your feedback can be much more purposeful. For example, this quote you cited supports your topic sentence, but make sure to give a few sentences of commentary to explain its significance. The final pitfall to avoid is not giving students feedback on what high-quality work looks like before they are assessed. Before students are assessed, they need to have a clear understanding of how their work will be evaluated and the level of quality that is expected. Teachers can accomplish this by showing them examples of high-quality work or teaching students the rubric they will use to evaluate their work. Remember, feedback is most useful if students can use it to make changes or revisions to improve the quality of their work before it is submitted. Technology can be helpful in assessing what students have mastered so that appropriate feedback can be given. Student response systems, sometimes called clickers, can be used for formative assessment. Each student has his or her own clicker that is used to answer questions that the teacher creates. Poll Everywhere is an online tool that collects student responses via the web. Students can use their cell phones, Twitter, or the Poll Everywhere website to respond to multiple choice or open-ended questions. Edmodo is an educational social media platform that can serve as a group space for students and teachers to share ideas, discuss topics, and provide feedback in a safe environment. The second Marzano strategy is reinforcing effort and providing recognition. This strategy relates to the key issue of student motivation, which involves how much effort students are willing to expend, as well as how long they are willing to continue working when the learning or the task gets challenging. Reinforcing effort and providing recognition can affect things like self-efficacy, which is a student's beliefs about his or her competence, attributions, which are a student's beliefs about what causes academic success or struggle, and task value, which is what students believe about the relevance or reasons for doing a task. Reinforcing effort involves teaching students about the relationship between effort and achievement. That is, highlighting the connection between what a student does in and outside of class and what that helps them to learn and achieve. Some best practices for reinforcing effort include teaching students about the relationship between effort and achievement, and providing students explicit guidance about what it means to expend effort in different academic situations. In other words, which actions and behaviors demonstrate strong effort for different academic tasks. To give an example, this guidance might take the form of explicitly showing students how to go about studying or preparing for an upcoming assessment. Providing recognition can be thought of as giving intentional and meaningful praise. Praise has positive effects on student learning and achievement if it is sincere and if it promotes self-determination. This means that the praise causes students to attribute their performance to things they can control, like how hard they studied or how many questions they asked. There are some pitfalls associated with praising students, though. In general, praise is either ineffective or harmful if it is person or ability oriented. This could be seen in expressions like, "You had the highest score in the class," or "You're really good at." This type of praise might cause the student to attribute their performance to unchangeable internal causes, like, I'm naturally good or not good at math, or to care more about how they compared to peers than their actual mastery of the content. So, when giving praise, it's important to remember a few best practices. First, give praise that promotes a mastery goal orientation. This is giving praise on progress toward goals rather than performance relative to peers. For example, on Friday's quiz, you didn't make any mistakes using the FOIL method to distribute, but one thing you still need to work on is factoring quadratic equations. Second, praise should be specific and aligned with expected performance. For example, you found great textual evidence to support your points. You just need to make sure you're using punctuation to weave your quotes correctly. And third, praise should be simple and direct. If praise is super exaggerated, students may feel that it is insincere or dismiss it. There are numerous technology tools that can be used when reinforcing effort and providing recognition. One example is Class Badges, which is an online tool that teachers can use to create digital badges for students. Class badges are sort of like Boy or Girl Scout badges that represent deeds that have been done or skills that have been acquired. In this case, digital badges can be given to students who have mastered certain skills. Edmodo also has a badge feature built into its platform. Now we come to the final strategy of this module, cooperative learning. Cooperative learning is one of the most powerful strategies in a teacher's toolbox. Students learn through social interaction, and the ability to talk and process with peers leads to deeper understandings. Just as students will not be able to work in isolation when they begin jobs and careers, we cannot expect them to learn in isolation either. At the same time, cooperative learning is more than just putting students in groups. Many teachers make the mistake of arbitrarily assigning students to groups and then expecting them to work together constructively and learn from one another. In reality, cooperative learning requires careful planning and facilitation on the part of the teacher. There are two necessary components for cooperative learning. The first is positive interdependence. This is designing group roles and tasks in such a way that the success of an individual promotes the success of the group. It also means that each student should be responsible for an equal share of the workload. The second is individual accountability. Each member of the group should get clear feedback on how his or her effort contributed to the overall goal, and the teacher must think about how individual group members will demonstrate proficiency with the skills and concepts that cooperative learning was designed to facilitate. When thinking about grouping students, it is important to think about different ways students can be grouped. Marzano identifies three different types of grouping. Informal. These are informal, ad hoc groups that teachers can use to have students process new learning or engage in practice. Examples include things like think, pair, share, or turning to a shoulder partner. Formal. Formal groups are usually organized around a larger assignment or task and can last for days or even weeks. Finally, there are base groups. These are groups designed to provide students support over an extended period of time, like a semester or year. Some teachers are reluctant to use cooperative learning because of concerns about classroom management or a perceived need to keep the class under control. While these concerns may be valid, there are some best practices that teachers can use to ensure that cooperative learning is well managed and that it leads to positive outcomes for all students. First, keep group sizes small. In general, groups should contain no more than 5 students. Second, groups should be used consistently and systematically. Kids are far more likely to respond favorably to cooperative learning if it is well organized and used on a regular basis rather than only sporadically. Third, teachers must explicitly teach and have students practice the structures and processes they will follow when working in cooperative groups. There should be clear directions for how students are expected to move into and out of groups, and norms for how they are expected to behave while in their groups. All of these should be taught and modeled. Finally, groups should be organized around a well-structured task with clearly defined learning goals and specific roles and responsibilities for each member. Group tasks should be interesting and promote the kind of cognitive conflict that causes students to share their ideas with one another. Using technology tools helps to increase opportunities for collaboration. Google Docs and Wikis are two examples of tools that can be used by multiple people to collaborate on a single project. With Google Docs, multiple students can contribute to documents, spreadsheets, and presentations. With Wikis, multiple students can work together to create an easy web page, and multiple wiki pages can be added to one wiki project. Further, technology can help teachers keep track of student roles within cooperative groups. Teachers and students can use tools such as Google Forms or blogs to keep track of students' contributions to cooperative learning tasks. KidBlog is one blogging tool that is designed specifically for K-12 teachers and students. This concludes our session on the first 3 Marzano strategies. Please move on to the next session, which is on helping students develop understanding.